Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever, found something, maybe utterly ruined, buried deep somewhere, and just wondered, could you ever bring that back to life? Today, we're embarking on a really fascinating deep dive. It's this incredible journey of transformation. The meticulous restoration of a World War II German Walther P38 automatic pistol, a genuine relic pulled from the bottom of a lake. And when they found it, it was barely recognizable, just a solid block of rust and mud, barely clinging to life.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating here, I think, isn't just the object itself, cool as it is, it's the sheer ingenuity involved in bringing it back. Our mission, really, in this deep dive is to pull out the most important insights from each painstaking step of this restoration to understand not just how they did it, but why each choice mattered, and maybe what lessons it holds about, perseverance and precision.
It's hard to even picture, when this P38 was first pulled out, it wasn't just rusty, right? It sounds like it was basically encased, fossilized, mud, rust, everything. I can only imagine the challenge of even starting. Where do you possibly begin with something so completely seized up?
Right. And that's where the first really crucial technique comes in, non-destructive electrolytic de-rusting. It sounds kind of complex, but the idea is actually quite elegant. You're using an electrical current, essentially, to create tiny gas bubbles between the rust and the actual metal underneath. These bubbles sort of gently push the rust away. They separate it without actually damaging the base material.
Okay, so it's safe for the pistol itself.
Incredibly safe, yeah. But, as you can probably guess, it's also slow and really messy. The solution it's in literally turns into this thick. They described it looking like a hot pot base sludge, which kind of visualizes just how much gunk is coming off.
Wow. So after that initial bath, was it clean then? Or still pretty bad?
Oh, not even close. That first step gets rid of the really heavy, flaky rust, sure, but it leaves behind this stubborn layer of embedded dirt and, residual corrosion products. So to tackle that, the restorer turned to a much more powerful follow-up cleaning, using sodium hydroxide.
Sodium hydroxide. That's a strong alkali, isn't it?
Exactly. Highly effective at dissolving stubborn organic stuff, grease, some oxides too.
And I bet working with something that potent, you've got to be really careful.
Absolutely. Strong alkalis are great cleaners, but they are aggressive. So the immediate critical step after using it is neutralization, usually with a mild acid. If you don't do that critical step, the alkali just keeps reacting with the metal. It could potentially cause even more damage than the original rusted. It's a really delicate balance.
Okay, that makes sense. So once the outside was getting somewhat manageable, what about the really hidden parts? How on earth do you clean inside the barrel? After decades underwater, it must have been packed solid with mud.
Yeah, that's a whole different kind of challenge, and it really speaks to how meticulous this work has to be. You can't just, run a brush through it. It takes specialized tools, a lot of patience, often repeated soaking, maybe mechanical cleaning, just gradually breaking down and flushing out all that hardened internal gunk.
As we're seeing these initial, really painstaking steps, maybe it's a good moment to pause and just understand the object itself a bit more.
Yeah.
The P38. Because its story is actually just as compelling as this restoration. This pistol, it was born in 1938 in Nazi Germany, designed initially as a sidearm for the Wehrmacht, the German army. During World War II, get this, over 1.2 million P38s were churned out across 3 different German factories. And its design was so solid, so robust, that it actually stayed in service with the German military all the way until 2004.
That's incredible longevity.
Isn't it? Now, after the war, French military factories also picked up production for a while. But, for collectors, those original WWII era ones are the most valuable, especially if they have the German Wehrmacht markings.
And it's amazing how a tiny detail can tell you so much about an artifact's history. Even on something as messed up as this one initially was, there's actually a pretty clever way to tell a wartime from a post-war P38. The wartime versions were all steel. Later on, to save weight and materials, they started using an aluminum alloy frame.
Okay.
So during this specific restoration, early on when they were trying to disassemble it, there was some grinding involved, and the sparks that came off, well, the nature of those sparks confirmed it was all steel, which meant definitively it was a WWII era P38. That little spark literally told a historical story.
Okay, so back to the restoration process. Here's where it got really interesting, apparently. After all that cleaning on the outside, the really difficult part of the mechanical disassembly was trying to free up the magazine section. The restorer was really wrestling with it, trying to get it apart, and what they found inside was, genuinely shocking. Some powder that could still ignite.
That's right. A clear, unambiguous sign. There were still live rounds inside the pistol.
Wow, after all that time submerged.
Exactly. A totally unexpected and frankly, potentially pretty hazardous discovery in a decades-old waterlogged firearm.
And sure enough, they carefully retrieved the bullets. And even though they were pretty damaged by corrosion, the markings on the base of the cartridges were still identifiable. And those markings provided crucial clues. actually helping them approximate the pistol's production date, somewhere within the war years.
Amazing detail preservation.
So even after a second round of that electrolytic derusting, that magazine was still just completely fused, stubbornly stuck. They just couldn't separate it using, normal methods. And this led to a pretty drastic step, almost surgical. They ended up having to actually saw off part of the magazine itself.
Wow.
Yeah. You know, imagine how frustrating that must have been, right?
Yeah.
Realizing you had to resort to actually cutting the thing. And even after that, getting the rest of the magazine out still took immense effort.
Yeah, the level of corrosion must have been just incredible. And to keep disassembling other stubborn parts, like the slide and barrel, which were also fused, they had to employ an even more advanced technique. Control the thermal expansion and contraction.
How does that work exactly?
Well, the principle relies on the fact that different materials, or even different parts of the same material, if they have different shapes and sizes, expand and contract at slightly different rates when you heat them up or cool them down. It's incredibly complex to manage properly because you're essentially playing with the metal's molecular structure at a micro level.
So you're heating and cooling strategically.
Precisely. The real insight here, I think, is how something that seems destructive, like big temperature swings, if you understand it and control it precisely, it can actually become one of the most delicate tools you have, allowing parts to just gently loosen themselves from a decades-long seizure. But even with that technique, they still needed what they called necessary destructive methods for some parts. Just shows the sheer scale of the corrosion they were up against.
Okay, so before we see this pistol fully put back together, let's just quickly touch on its original design purpose again. The P38 was developed specifically to replace the Luger P08, right? Which was iconic, but apparently increasingly complex and problematic.
Absolutely. And this really raises an important question, doesn't it? How much does wartime necessity actually drive innovation? The Luger P08, I mean, it's a classic design, beautiful even, but it was notoriously complex, very expensive to manufacture. During the war, a single P08 cost something like 148 cents, which was a staggering amount back then.
Wow.
The P38, by contrast, the unit cost was only about $19.80, less than 1/7 the cost.
Wow.
For Germany, which was really struggling with resources, this was a massive, massive advantage. And even after the war, in the civilian market, a P38 still sold for around $100. So it wasn't just cheap wartime production.
So practicality over complexity.
Exactly. The P38 proves that sheer ingenuity, especially under extreme pressure like wartime, can deliver solutions that are way more practical, cost-effective, and frankly, often superior in real-world use compared to even these revered, almost artisanal designs like the Luger. It was really like transitioning from a craftsman's masterpiece to a practical tool designed for mass production and efficiency in the field.
So, with the trigger mechanism finally out, that marked the end of the initial disassembly phase. And here's where the restorer's philosophy really comes into play, which I found interesting. They weren't trying to make it look perfectly as new, like some restorations aim for. Instead, the focus was more on bringing this old firearm back to a familiar state, restoring its main shape, its function, rather than trying to erase every sign of its long, hard history.
Right, and that practical approach meant doing things like targeted welding, carefully filling in pitted areas, but only where it was really crucial. Crucial for structural rigidity or for making sure parts would assemble correctly later on. It wasn't primarily about making it look perfect, but making it work correctly. So this involved a really intensive kind of iterative process, repairing, patching, then lots of grinding, polishing. The main goal was always to ensure a precise operational fit between those critical moving parts, especially the slide and the frame, so the pistol could be reassembled properly and actually hold its form.
Of course, beyond just patching up the original metal, a lot of parts were either totally missing or just too damaged, too corroded to save. But fortunately, the restorer, clearly experienced, had a supply of spare secondhand P38 parts. So for instance, they needed a piece of the trigger guard. They actually took a secondhand trigger guard and meticulously cut out the section they needed to replace the missing bit on this pistol.
Yeah, resourcefulness is key in this kind of work. And once those replacement parts were carefully welded into place, integrated, then began the process of grinding away all the excess weld material, making it smooth. Then all the main components, the originals and the replacements, went through this uniform grinding and polishing process. To ensure really seamless transitions between them, it's almost like sculpting the metal back into shape.
Getting everything ready for the finish.
Exactly. After all that metal work, everything was thoroughly cleaned with alcohol. You have to strip off absolutely any grease or oil to get them ready for the protective surface treatments.
And these surface treatments, this is where the pistol really starts to get its final look and protection back, right?
Precisely. The first really crucial step here was phosphating. Now, this isn't just a paint or a coating, it's a chemical conversion process. It creates this dense microporous phosphate film right on the metal surface itself, which is incredibly corrosion resistant. It also acts as a fantastic base for other coatings. It prevents rust, obviously, enhances lubrication between moving parts, and even improves wear resistance.
Okay, so multiple benefits.
Definitely. After the phosphating, the parts were carefully rinsed, usually with distilled water, and then came a cold blackening treatment. This involves applying a chemical solution that forms a black ferric oxide protective film on the surface. Now, what's really key here is that this black film, it's intentionally slightly porous.
Why is that?
Because it allows for an extra layer of protection. They spray on an anti-rust protective oil, and that oil seeps into the pores of the blackening layer, so you end up with this combined, highly effective protective system. The blackening layer plus the oil film gives enhanced durability, really good longevity.
Ah, clever. Layer upon layer of protection and refinement. And then finally, I guess, a black coating for the exterior parts to bring it all together visually.
That's right, the final aesthetic touch. And with all those intricate processes finally complete, well, it was time for the moment of truth, the final assembly.
Okay, so as the pistol finally takes its final form, going through that crucial reassembly, which, some might see as the less exciting part, but it's critical. It feels like a perfect moment to explore another really innovative feature of the P38, something that truly set it apart beyond just being cost-effective. This handgun was actually one of the world's first mass-produced pistols to adopt the double-action, single-action trigger, the DASA system.
Yeah, and what's truly ingenious about that design is how it fundamentally improved both the speed and the accuracy of firing. It offered a really advanced operational experience for its time.
Right.
So imagine you have a round in the chamber. For the very first shot, you could just pull the trigger straight back. That's the double action pull. It simultaneously cocks the hammer and then releases it to fire. No need to manually cock the hammer first.
My faster first shot.
Exactly. Then, for every shot after that, the cycling of the slide automatically leaves the hammer in the cocked position. So your subsequent trigger pulls are much lighter, much shorter. That's the single action pull. This significantly enhanced both the speed you could fire at and the potential precision, especially under pressure. A huge step forward.
And there you have it, the fully restored World War II German Walther P38 pistol. I mean, from a completely rusted mud-encased relic pulled from a lake, it's been transformed back into, well, a testament to this incredibly meticulous process, to material science, and of course to its own remarkable place in history.
Absolutely. This whole deep dive into the P38's resurrection, it really highlights this amazing blend of, historical preservation, cutting-edge material science, and some serious engineering ingenuity. It shows us how understanding the fundamental properties of materials, how they corrode, how they react to treatments, how they expand and contract, and then applying precise, often really complex techniques can bring something back from what looks like, well, total ruin. It's just a powerful testament to meticulous work and maybe the sheer determination needed to solve what seemed like completely insurmountable problems.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this? I think this P38 deep dive shows us something important. Even when something seems utterly ruined, or maybe an obstacle feels completely seized up and impossible, understanding its foundational elements, its history, its materials, its original purpose, that's often the very first step to unlocking its potential again, to finding a way forward. What impossible problem are you facing right now that might just need maybe a non-destructive electrolytic de-rusting of your own assumptions to get it moving again?